Welcome back to Church and State with Chris Ferrara and Brian McCall. Good to see you again, Chris. Francis has been busy since last time we talked about Bishop Strickland.
Yeah, the apocalyptic pope.
Well, it's funny. You described him. We did that special on Bishop Strickland as a party boss. And that's, I mean, really what he just seems to show him with more and more. Our first thing this week are some confirmed rumors that Francis had a meeting with Vatican officials and sort of blew his top, as he's apparently wont to do, and said, we need to punish our enemies. And the Cardinal Burke is fomenting disunity in the church. Those are apparently his claims. And so if you're a party boss, what do you do to somebody that is, your enemy? If you're the head of the mafia, you punish them. So what did he do? He evicted him. He got an eviction notice, thrown out of his Rome apartment, gone on the street, homeless. Now, obviously not homeless. I'm sure he has a place in the United States, but in Rome, his apartment that he's given as a cardinal to attend consistories, gone. Then he also took away his salary. Now, again, this is the equivalent of the Chief Justice of the United States. He was the head of the Apostolic Signatura. He could keep working, but Francis already removed him from his job, so he can't work anymore. He's being paid equivalent of a pension. But no, Francis taking that away too. So no money, no apartment. This is what you do if you cross the boss.
Well, he declared him a non-person because he's not following the party line, which is Bergoglianism. And Bergoglianism is whatever he thinks Catholicism is.
Right.
Which is why he may, in a sense, be rescued from the charge of being a formal heretic, because he might actually be so deluded as to think that his notion of Catholicism is actually orthodox.
Wow.
This is the modernist delusion, the idea that they have the Holy Spirit on their side, that dogmas and doctrines must evolve, the church must change, as he has so infamously said. We don't need a new church, we just need a different church. I mean, the hubris there is just astonishing. Mm-hmm. So the party line has been bucked by people who are suspect of Catholic orthodoxy, including Cardinal Burke, and so they have to be declared non-persons. You don't get a lodging, you don't get a salary, you're nothing. You're reduced to penury. Of course, he's got many friends. He won't be suffering in that way. And also, it's a badge of honor, because to be treated this way by the party boss indicates, through your consignment to the gulag, the ecclesial gulag, that you're defending the truth against an enemy of the truth. And let's face it, that's what he is. That's what Bergoglio is.
And again, these are not one-off. I mean, he's really got a little string of these. We obviously, in the United States, Joseph Strickland, the most obvious. And I think since last time we talked, he's done some more interviews. I mean, he's basically said, I spoke truth to power. I would not bend. I would not change. And they told me that's why they were getting rid of me. But before him, there was a bishop in Puerto Rico who was
another one
for not sending his seminarians to the Episcopal Conference's seminary because he said that was heretical. Essentially, he didn't train them, and for committing the mortal sin of telling people you don't have to get the vaccine if you don't want to.
This Pope has no shame, even though it has been revealed that the vaccine not only is ineffective, but may actually be promoting transmission, not to mention promoting an increase in all-cause mortality, which is otherwise inexplicable. He basically insisted that people take a death shot.
But again,
that's what it is.
Even if that weren't even true, even if that weren't true, you remove a bishop for telling people you don't have to get that particular medical treatment. I mean, even if it were not a harmful medical treatment, what does that have to do with the Catholic faith?
Well, he's basically an adept of the New World Order, and his agenda is more political than religious. In fact, I would say it's entirely political and not religious. And his advocacy of the compulsory vaccination regime, when he has absolutely no knowledge of the medical issues involved. Of course, his ignorance about it, the subject, never stopped him from pronouncing on it. I'm thinking back to even his pronouncement on Scottish independence. He had an opinion on that. There's just nothing he won't opine on, no matter what his lack of qualifications or total ignorance of the subject. So, yeah, it's a political agenda. Compulsory vaccination. He defended the lockdowns, the hysterical overreaction that destroyed economies and ruined
Mm,
hundreds of millions of lives. That was okay by him. In fact, it was morally obligatory. He's basically, I hate to use the word, but what else can you say? A stooge of the powers that be. He's their willing mascot.
mm.
He's dressed up in the white of the papacy, and he serves as a tool of people who are utterly opposed to everything the papacy stands for.
Well, and isn't this, I mean, exactly what the Freemasons told? I mean, we found out from them when the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita was discovered in the 19th century. This is exactly what they wanted. They said they wanted not necessarily a pope who was a card carrying Freemason, but essentially someone who, from the chair of Peter, would spread their ideas. And have they really gotten their what they looked for over 100 years ago?
Yeah, that document refers to a pope according to our needs.
Yes.
Doesn't even have to be a knowing Mason. Now, whatever you think of the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, let's make one thing clear. The Southern Poverty Law Center has it completely wrong when it calls it an anti-Semitic document. Whether you think it's authentic or not, certainly the Pope thought so. Pius IX, was it, who said it should be promulgated?
I thought it was Leo the 13th.
Yeah, it was Leo the 13th. I stand corrected.
Yeah.
He thought it should be promulgated and that it was authentic. But whatever you think, it has nothing to do with Jews or anti-Semitism. It's all about what the church has condemned more times than any error against the faith, i.e., Freemasonry. There are
Mm.
more than 200 condemnations by the popes against the Freemasons, and they're basically parallel secular church, which draws away Catholics into a secular, syncretistic, anti-Catholic movement. And so this document says, look, we're not going to get a Masonic pope. We're not going to have a pope who's a 33rd degree Mason, but we can get one who is a pope according to our needs. And there you have it with this pontificate. I don't think
Mm.
there's any question that the Masons are delighted by this pope.
Uh, Absolutely. And again, whether historians can debate the authenticity of the document, again, Leo the 13th and his advisors certainly thought it was a real document. But interestingly, it almost doesn't matter because
Right.
what the document talks about has played itself out over time with sort of spreading these ideas, which, again, as you said, has nothing to do with Judaism. Specifically, it deals with the ideas of Freemasonry, which is, contrary to what people say, a religion. I mean, it's a false religion. It's not just a buddies club to get together and hang out together. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah, and what I'm telling you about it comes from someone who has been privileged,
Mm,
happy, even proud to represent Orthodox rabbis in challenges to the vaccine mandate that this pope thinks was morally obligatory.
mm.
And it's interesting that the Orthodox rabbis, just a bit of a digression here, are treated the same way we traditionalists are by our own kind,
Wow.
ostracized as fanatics, extremists, and so on and so forth. So again, this is not a question of anti-Semitism. In case the FBI is monitoring this broadcast, because it seems now that they want to monitor Catholics across the country. In fact, another digression. Did you read, in terms of the state which we're about to discuss, that the special counsel or special prosecutor Jack Smith subpoenaed the Twitter interactions of every American with Trump?
Wow. Every American.
Yeah, we'll take that up when we talk about the
Yeah.
revolution in Argentina.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But getting back to the main thread of this story, I mean, what do you think? What should Cardinal Burke do? I mean, he's guys have been fired from every one of his jobs at a very young age. Now this is taken away. I mean, what should he do?
Well, if he were a younger man, and if it were me,
Hmm.
I would simply refuse to leave the apartment, not because I need the creature comforts of the apartment, but because
Right.
it's unjust. And
Yeah.
I would challenge the Pope to have the Carabinieri forcibly remove me from the apartment
Yeah.
as a provocation. In fact, I would make sure that I have other living arrangements, and I would declare I don't need this apartment. I don't even really want this apartment, but I'm staying put to demonstrate that this Pope cannot be a dictator who abuses his authority. I'm doing this not for my own good, but for the good of everyone who might
Wow.
fall victim to his vindictive, narrow-minded intolerance of what is essentially Catholics and the Catholic faith.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, again, what's amazing about this is you have bishops very close to the Pope have been found to have committed grave financial mismanagement, covered up or been involved in sexual depravity, and they're perfectly fine. They're not being thrown out on the street. They're not being removed. Again, that's really what I think people see. That even non-Catholics are beginning to see and just saying this seems insane.
Well, he is a Pope who simply doesn't do Catholicism.
That's
He's doing something. We don't know what it is. It's some kind of new world religion that he thinks he can foist upon the
right.
church of bimillennial standing. And we see one outrage after another in that regard. The Pope of inclusivity, who's absolutely intolerant of anyone who disagrees with him.
Right.
We just saw a couple of days ago how he made it a point, and this is obviously a provocation, a thumb in the eye of any believing Catholic. He invited a busload of transvestite prostitutes.
Yeah, to have
Let
lunch
me
with.
repeat that. Transvestite prostitutes to the Vatican for lunch, where they had spinach and ricotta stuffed cannelloni.
So I mean, what's the conversation like? So how's work going?
Yeah.
You busy at work lately? Oh, okay.
He managed to find a group of people who embody every imaginable
Right.
offense against the
Yes.
Sixth Commandment, put them in a bus, and brought them to lunch.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just thumbing his nose at the
Yeah.
faithful,
Exactly.
abusing his authority. Every day he sits on the chair of Peter. It's unbelievable what's going on. And I can't believe there's anybody left who would still defend this pontificate. The number of defenders of the indefensible seems to me has dwindled to near zero.
It's dwindled, but there's a few diehards out there.
Well, there always are. So.
Well, and interestingly, among those who are really not a supporter, is his home country of Argentina, which we're going to turn to
You won't
because
dare go there.
he won't go because it's funny when he was elected. A lot of the bishops said we're glad we got him promoted upstairs to get rid of him. I mean,
Oh yeah, he's
it's
not going. There's no
interesting.
question he's afraid to go back there.
But he's now said the reason he's not going back there is because of a recent election, which we're going to turn to now. Argentina has a new president. I'm going to show you a little video clip of what he's like. It's a speech that he's giving. He's going through his sort of main political points, and you'll see what one of them is. Again, it's in Spanish. Won't run it long, but just so you can see it.
Competitiva que no solo dará fin al quiserismo, sino que además dará fin a la casta política parasitaria, chorra e inútil que...
And what he's basically saying is, we're finished with the political class. They're done. They're over. We're done with them.
His polemic on that is absolutely wonderful. He accurately describes the political class as parasites on the body politic,
Yep.
and socialism is a scheme to enrich the few at the top while everybody below them suffers. That's what socialism is. It's the famous aphorism of Soviet humor that capitalism is the exploitation of man by man, but socialism is quite the opposite. He gets that, and he is a disruptor on the model of Donald Trump. Even though he says he's an anarcho-capitalist, and I have absolutely no brief for the anarcho-capitalists, nevertheless, his election is a revolution in Argentina and a positive development. I'll take an anarcho-capitalist any day
over a communist.
over a communist.
Yeah.
And he's an anarcho-capitalist of a different stripe because he's also ardently pro-life. There is an anarcho-capitalist argument against protection of life in the womb on the theory that the baby in the womb is a trespasser.
Yes.
Hans Hermann Hoppe, for one, makes that horrific argument and says when the day comes that the fetus can be removed and brought to term outside of the womb, then he'll be pro-life. But otherwise, the fetus is a trespasser. Well, Millay is not like that. He says there's a right to life at all stages of human existence, including in the womb. So he is a kind of a Latin American / Catholic type of anarcho-capitalist. Again, the Trump of Argentina. And the Argentinians have had quite enough of the very status quo that the current occupant of the chair of Peter defends and is a tool of. As he himself said in his interview with Tucker Carlson, this Pope is a friend of murderous dictators. It's that simple. He is.
Hmm.
The Chinese regime he defends, the Cuban regime, Raul and Fidel Castro. He had great relations with Raul. Remember when he went to visit him and he held his hand as they had a hush-hush conversation together in
Hmm.
Raul's residence? Yeah, he's the friend of dictators and he's the enemy of free market capitalism. Now, we have our own criticisms of free market capitalism, but what is the alternative? The alternative is something that Millet has been elected to end, which is the socialist depredation of entire populations for the benefit of a few.
Well, and again, the difference is a again, here again is some terminology, but a free market economy is something which can have excesses and
Right.
can have problems, and when particularly when economic behavior is not placed within a Christian moral, Catholic moral uh, context. But communism, as as Pius XI told us, is just inherently bad. Like it's not like you can have not so bad communism. Communism, in its core principles, is just fundamentally wrong. So again, that's what a lot of people forget. Yes, Leo XIII talked about some of the capitalist errors of his time and some of the abuse that was going on, but uh, as he and then later Leo Pius XI in his encyclical on socialism says, essentially, at its core, fundamentally, socialism it's impossible to be a socialist.
Well, as the popes have said, beginning with Leo in Rome Novarum, Pius XI in
Yes.
Quadragesimo Anno, and John Paul II in Centesimo Anno, capitalism can be mitigated
Yes.
if those who engage in capitalistic activity adhere to Catholic social teaching, which is basically the
Yes.
rights of the working man. But communism cannot be mitigated.
Yes.
There's nothing you can do to mitigate that anti-God, anti-Catholic, intrinsically so, ideology, which has resulted in the death of hundreds of millions of people.
Hundreds of millions. I mean, past centuries littered with them. But it is interesting because I know you are somewhat of an expert, well, an expert on libertarianism. You wrote an entire book on it. And how do you account for this difference in kind of his version of libertarianism and the kind of von Mises Austrian kind of as that played out in America?
Well, I think he's coming from an explicitly Catholic perspective. We know that the vice president is a Catholic who goes to a Pius X chapel in Argentina. He's
Yes.
vice president, so he's coming at it with some Catholic precisions that he grafted onto this idea of anarcho-capitalism. He does defend, and I heard in this interview with Carlson, the so-called non-aggression principle, which is basically a reduction of the Decalogue to a duologue. Don't
Right.
kill me and don't take my stuff.
Right.
That's it. 2 commandments. Now he pays lip service to that, but there's more to him than that.
Hmm.
As we see with his stance on abortion, he believes in the right to life from the moment of conception. Now he may end up compromising on that issue to get whatever legislation he has in mind passed, because politics is the art of the possible. But he's not quite what we see in the American version of anarcho-capitalism, because he's coming to power in a Catholic context in what is still nominally an entirely Catholic country.
Now,
By the
again,
way, for that reason, Francis is afraid to go back there.
yeah, exactly. Now, again, to be fair, he is, I think, best described as a fallen away Catholic. He doesn't seem
Oh, he
like
himself, sure.
he himself, but here, yes, his vice president elect, Victoria Villarreal, is again. I've seen not only seen news reports, but I've spoken to some people in the country. She is most definitely a traditional Catholic and attends a traditional Catholic chapel there in Argentina. So again, the fact that this is who he's running with is his running mate, even if he himself seems to have fallen from the faith. We should pray he comes back, but certainly shows that his philosophy, his is he's willing to work with someone closely like that.
Well, I don't know anything about his personal life. I haven't really
Mm,
looked into it. There may be things in his personal life that keep him from returning to the faith. But as the saying goes, once a Catholic, always a Catholic.
mm,
He's a baptized Catholic, so there is an impulse which comes with the configuration to Christ that baptism brings that is affecting his public policy positions, even if he's not formally a member of the church at this time. So
mm.
he's coming at it, as I say, in a Catholic country from a somewhat Catholic perspective. And it was interesting when you showed the picture of the vice president. It's amazing what a face can tell you. You look at her face and you see this is a woman who has the grace of God. Look at her face.
Mm,
She doesn't have the face of a politician.
yes. That's a
Now,
compliment.
he is definitely a politician.
He
There's
is a
no doubt about
politician,
that.
definitely,
But he's a
definitely.
politician that we can work with, whose election is actually a great development, as was the
Yes.
election of Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, another stunning development.
And again, that's the point. Again, we're still in the midst of some of darkness here, but there are some interesting signs around the world that, again, people have reached a point where they're saying enough is enough. Now, is it bad enough that enough people are going to really change things? I think we're reaching that point. We're getting close to it. I mean, who would have thought someone like this? I mean, Argentina was like one of the most sort of solidly socialist, run by the political class. The Netherlands, as you say, another one, right in the heart of liberal socialist Europe, and these stunning results. I mean, not to even to ignore the strong showing of the National Front in the last election, even though they didn't win in France, the Eastern Europe with Orban. I mean, it does give you a sense that a corner is being turned, that the world population is woken up to what the socialist elites have been doing
Yeah,
for the last several decades.
woke in a good way.
Yes, and it woke.
Awakened to the evil that surrounds them.
Yes,
And the reason Millet got elected is that the socialists literally ruined the country.
yes,
It went from the most prosperous country in Latin America and one of the most prosperous countries in the world to basically a quagmire of poverty and
yes.
dissolution
I
because
mean,
of
literally, you have to bring like a stack of money to go buy a lunch at a cafe. That's how
yeah, the
bad things are.
inflation is in triple digits. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that's the situation there. Now in the United States, we
Well, we have
have Steve.
Bidenomics. We're okay. We're
Yeah, right. Bidenomics. Well, we have Trump, who is the model, it seems, for Millet. I think I
yes,
literally models himself after Trump. But we have a year coming up now in the state, paralleling the crisis in the church, where we're going to see things that, as Victor Davis Hanson says, you'd better brace yourself for.
yes,
His fear is that these Democrats will stop at nothing to keep Trump from getting reelected.
yes.
They will pull tricks out of their bag of tricks that we can't even imagine between now and election day. It seems to me it will be a miracle of miracles if Trump manages to gain re-election. And if he does, he'd better watch out. He better lay on some extra Secret Service protection because he's the disruptor in this country.
Mm,
So now we have these people in the Western polities who represent a phenomenon among the populace of enough of this. We need a disruptor to topple this corrupt status quo. It's
yes.
the same thing in the church. That's what traditionalism is all about. A resistance to the increasingly corrupt status quo, of which this Pope is the literal physical embodiment,
Yes.
as well as the intellectual and metaphorical one.
Uh, Absolutely. Well, and again, signs of hope. Again, it often has to get darker before it gets lighter. But the first step, as any psychologist will tell you, is to recognize things are not working. Recognize there's a problem. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people recognize it but don't know what to do about it. They don't have the solutions because we've been living under centuries of amnesia, where we've essentially forgotten sane political philosophy, Catholic principles of constituting states, but it's all there. All that knowledge is there. It's sitting it, in books from the past, and we just need to dust it off, and bring it out again. But
Well, I think Trump, in his own crude way, has stumbled across the essence of it,
yes,
which is that the rebellion against the church in philosophy and in religion, particularly in philosophy, which followed the religious rebellion, it's an assault on common sense. So Trump is now saying things like, "I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I just have common sense."
right,
And common sense is what's under attack with this insanity of boys in the girls' locker room, boys competing with women in various sports, the transgender lunacy. You're whatever sex you say you are on a given day of the week. This attack on common sense has reached its terminal stage during this presidency. And so what we have to do is fight for a restoration of common sense in the church and in the state. But what's traditionalism? Traditionalism is a
Common sense.
common sense defense. We are, as I've always said, we are masters of the obvious.
Right.
That's all we are. You ruined the liturgy, now nobody's going to church. You reformed the seminaries, now they're all empty. You reformed Catholic education, now all the schools are closing. You tried to reform the whole faith, and now everybody's apostatizing. Duh, can't you see what you've done?
Right.
So all we say is, give us back the religion of our fathers, which, by the way, traditionalists have never ceased to practice because they have never been in any way commanded to cease to practice it. So it's all a matter of observing the obvious, restoring common sense. And,
Yes.
we say that the Holy Ghost is in charge of the church, but we can't forget that Christ is in charge of history. He is the Lord of history.
Yes.
That's what the Message of Fatima is all about. He sent his mother to remind us that he is the Lord of history. And that when the consecration of Russia is finally effected in exactly the manner requested, instead of all these ridiculous substitute ceremonies, the Lord of history will show us how a miraculous civilizational restoration can happen. It happened after the fall of the Roman Empire. It will happen again sometime before the final days of the world, when, as the Old Testament says, God will roll up this world like a scroll and toss it aside.
And again, we can do our part. First Saturdays, remember the first Saturday devotion, receive communion, confession within 8 days, say the rosary, meditate for 15 minutes on those mysteries, and offer all of that in reparation for offenses against the Immaculate Heart. Again, we can't consecrate Russia, but we can do our part. We can say the rosary every day. We can do penance. We can observe the 5 first Saturdays. And our part, we've done our part.
The rosary is the chief weapon in the arsenal of the laity.
Yes.
It has enormous power to effect change through the action of, as I said, the Lord of history. I'm thinking of a couple of examples more recently than the Battle of Lepanto, which we always refer to. Think of the development in Austria. Why did the Soviets pick up and leave Eastern Austria? No one to this day can really explain it. I saw a panel of scholars trying to discuss why it happened. No one really knows. Well, we know why. There was a rosary rally with 1 million people
Yes.
marching in the street, praying for the end of Soviet occupation. And one day they just picked up and left, leaving behind the choicest real estate in Europe.
Exactly.
So this can happen again. So the rosary is something we can do and must do at the very least. And I speak as someone who had to develop the habit myself.
Yes, very true. Well, there you have it. There's our view of church and state as we see it this week, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks when we'll see what other surprises are in store for us.
And let's look ahead to the broadcast we're going to do in the new year, which will involve stuff that's absolutely cataclysmic compared to the already cataclysmic developments we've seen.
Well, on that positive note.
Yes, on that positive note.
God bless.
God bless.